Good morning, Eagles Nation. It's a Monday, July 15th. We are moving right along in the offseason, back for another week here on Birds 365. Good to be back with Johnny Mac. Good to be back with our listening audience, as you guys are so loyal to us, and we appreciate you. I'm going to give you guys the countdown, Johnny Mac, before I get into today's topics. We'll have a good guest. We have 8 days until the Eagles report to training camp. We have 17 days until open practice, 52 days away from the NFL opener, and 53 days away from the Eagles kicking off in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Good Monday to you, Johnny Mac. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Yeah, getting very, very close. A week, I try to get hyper focused. A week from tomorrow is reporting day. So that's it for me. Keep it focused on the first thing, as Nick Sirianni would say, win the day. Don't worry about that other stuff. But I get why people are worried about it. But yeah, getting close and it's exciting. You're going to see a lot of Nick Sirianni stories out there this morning from an interview we were able to do with him, wide-ranging interview that I can now talk about that went about 45 minutes. So we'll get into that. Yeah, Eagles previews, training camp previews, that kind of stuff. It's an exciting time of year.
Yeah, very exciting time of year. We will certainly dive into that Nick Sirianni interview, Johnny Mac. Maybe we start on that and go through our training camp previews after our guest, Caden Steele. Obviously, Johnny Mac, something big happened this weekend in terms of the world. We are a talk show. We are not a political show. I am not looking to get political with everybody. But Donald Trump, somebody attempted to assassinate the former president. If you just have a word you'd like to put out there, Johnny Mac, I'll give you the floor.
You're getting me in trouble. My word would be stop being morons, people. Stop it, stop it, stop it. If you're a wingnut, you're a wingnut, Democrat, Republican. If your whole life is invested in this stuff, grow up. You don't even know these people. You think somebody's Hitler, and then you create this, and then you have people on the other side. Guess what? If you think somebody's Hitler and you talk about it for years and years and years and years, you create this environment where stuff like this can happen. And guess what? Then you can't go on TV and say, "Oh, we got to be more empathetic to each other." When you just spent 8 years degrading the guy and saying he's Hitler, you can't say, "Oh, but do it at the ballot box." You create these uneducated morons who are taking shots at somebody running for the presidency of the United States. It's embarrassing to this country. Grow up. If you're a wingnut, you don't know these people, as I said. Don't spend your entire life on social media talking about politics that you know nothing about. Stop it. That would be my getting in trouble rant to start the show. And
Well said, Johnny Mac. It's very true, though. I mean, when you look at the way it's all gone, you said it perfectly. If for my word, I would just say I'd like to pray for everybody. Pray for our nation. Pray for healing. Pray for Trump's family. Pray for Biden and his family. I mean, we all just need to look in the mirror, take a deep breath on the scale, and just tone it back a notch. I mean, but you're right, Johnny Mac. They're saying, be at the ballot box.
And by the way, somebody died protecting his own family.
Yeah.
So, so many of these knuckleheads would go, this guy's a scumbag for going to a political rally because they're that hyper focused on people agreeing with them and their thoughts. And this guy, meanwhile, is diving on his daughters to try to save them. And he did save them, and it cost him his life. I mean, that guy's a freaking hero. No matter what political candidate he supports. And if people can't get to that visceral level, I can't help them. I can't help them. Because how many of those people that sit there in judgment on other people, how many of them would give up their lives for their family and be that brave and be that in the moment and saying, this is my daughter. I'd rather protect her and put myself at risk. That's real. All your hatred of various politicians is not real.
Well said, Johnny Mac. Rest in peace to Corey Comparator, his name was. I'm happy you brought him up. Obviously praying for him, praying for his family, and as I mentioned, praying for the entire nation. Johnny Mac, let's move into football. Good words there from you. Appreciate you saying that. Appreciate everybody in the chat who is happy we addressed it. I think, we are a football show, but when things like that happen, they are worth addressing. We are
Go
on
after yourself. Sorry. For those who aren't happy that we addressed it, we'll talk plenty of Eagles. Again, be an adult for 10 seconds.
Agreed,
Suck it up. You don't get to hear about your favorite football team for 5 seconds. Sorry, pissed off.
You're good. You're right, though. I mean, you're spot on, Johnny Mac, as you normally are. Very good take, very objective, good analysis by you, and we appreciate you sharing that. Once again, rest in peace to Corey Comparator, the guy who did lose his life protecting his daughter's very heart-wrenching Facebook post from his daughter that I did read, which was tough to read. Johnny Mac, let's dive into the Nick Sirianni stuff. You mentioned you had an interview, you had a meeting with Nick Sirianni. I guess it was originally off the record. Tell us more about that. Tell us what you learned and what to make of it. You wrote an article this morning, the rebranding of head coach Nick Sirianni. Tell us what you know.
Yeah, it was embargoed, so it wasn't off the record. So off the record means we can't use it. In this case, we had to wait a little bit, giving us an opportunity to talk to a head coach for the extended, more of a deep dive type of big picture investment for close to an hour, 45 minutes. So anytime you get the head coach for that long, especially coming off last season, the collapse and all the change and the turnover and the churn with the coaching staff, the coordinators, most notably offensively, obviously much more surgical than defensively, which is, Vic Fangio got the longer rope to bring in as many as his guys as possible. Really, it's Doug Nussmeier, Kellen Moore, and Doug Nussmeier being his right-hand man. And then they got Kyle Bolero, who's a lower level coach, and that's it. Everybody else is back from the Nick Sirianni staff for the most part, which I think was a positive for the head coach. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see his explanation. I'm pretty concrete with the idea that he was proactive, understood what was coming, and sort of tried to take control of it, if that makes sense.
Yep.
He could have waited and for Jeffrey Lurie to say, no, you have to change the offense. You can't have that offense. And I think if he did that, he's in a weakened position. I think he did the best he possibly could. And he sort of opened that up and explained that a little bit, understood the landscape and did the best he could. And now he's in the best position to survive. Look, the only way you're going to survive if you're Nick Sirianni this year is if you reach these massive expectations. So this has to be a very good football team. But if they do, he's in a position to sort of get his feet under him, better ground under him to move forward. But I started with Bum Phillips. He had that famous quote back in the day for old school football guy. There's two kinds of coaches, them that's hired and them that's fired. They all know there's a shelf life in this league, every single one of them. And Nick's been coaching for 20 years now. He started right out of college, essentially, at Mount Union with his longtime mentor, Larry Karras. And if you think about it, he's had 6 stops over 20 years. So you see the shelf life. Now, most of that was about ambition as he climbed the ladder from Mount Union to IUP, gets into the NFL with Todd Haley, gets his foot in the door, Kansas City, Chargers, Indianapolis Eagles. Most of that is the ambition of trying to reach the height of your profession, which Nick did at a very young age. This will be, his 4th season. So technically he's over the average of the shelf life.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in the NFL. This team's turned 91 earlier this month. The Eagles have been around for a long time. He's got the best winning percentage in Eagles history. Bottom line. He's made the playoffs 3 consecutive years. Bottom line. And he's That's the reality of the NFL. It's what have you done for me lately? And what he's done for you lately is lose 6 out of 7. And that's why he's on the hot seat. It's a very, very fast moving, very, very unforgiving league. And he's on the hot seat.
John, with all that context being said, how hot is Nick Sirianni's seat coming into the year? I mean, have we made maybe too much of it, or is it as hot as we believe it is if they don't reach whatever expectations Jeffrey Lurie has set in his head? Is he as good as gone?
Well, I mean, he's as good as gone. If they don't make the playoffs, he's as good as gone.
Well, yeah, that's
I mean, if they're one and done like they were last year, I don't like his odds. I guess there can be some context, you know, if you lose the quarterback in week 18 or something like that, you fight and claw, and maybe you lose on a last-second field goal. Maybe you can spin that in a positive direction. So I don't want to say concretely. There's always the situation always matters. But yeah, if they're not making a deep playoff run, whether that's playing very well in the divisional round and losing, or going to the NFC Championship game, or obviously the Super Bowl, he's in trouble because people think, this is one of the best. And I agree with them. It's one of the more talented rosters in the NFL. But, we talked about overrated players last week a little bit. They've overrated some spots on this roster, a lot of people, because of reputations elsewhere. So it's not like this team's a guaranteed Super Bowl contender. There's a lot of work to be done, but the expectations are they should be a guaranteed Super Bowl contender.
How do you view the change from, giving up what he gave up in order to be that bigger CEO, head coach? I mean, the quote at the end of your article, John, was very interesting. At the end of the day, and this is the quote, at the end of the day, I have to do what's best for the team, and sometimes it is hard, right? And like, I won't lie to you, that was hard, but I knew in my gut what was best for the team, and I see a lot of positives from it, Sirianni said. I'm able to see things from a 30,000-foot view. You do what's best for the team because you love the team, not because you love your selfish reasons of what you want. Do you agree with Nick Sirianni there, John, that this is a net positive for the football team?
No, I don't think it's a net positive from the start, because I don't think he wanted to do it. And I asked him that question, and it was basically earlier in the session. He talked about sort of his history in coaching, and when he got injured as a player at Mount Union, that's when he found out that, he wanted to make football his career, because he thought to himself while he was rehabbing and he wasn't involved and he wasn't able to play, he kept thinking to himself how much he loves the game, and if it's taken away from him, how he would feel. And he didn't like that feeling, and he kind of understood that was going to be his future, to try to stay in football as long as possible. So once I heard that, for those of us who've been around Nick since he's gotten here, he loves his offense. And there was a quote from last year when he was talking about play calling and giving it to Shane and giving it to Brian Johnson. And he explained it was still his offense. And he was very, very vocal about it, and said, doesn't matter if it's Howie Roseman or Shane Steichen or Brian Johnson, yada, yada, yada. Howie Roseman, he brought up Jonathan Gannon, Dom DeSandro, he brought up everybody. Sander Krause, John McMullen. It doesn't matter who's calling the plays, it's his offense. And he said basically many times, as long as I'm here, it's going to be my offense, and it doesn't matter who the play caller is. Well, he's still here, and it's not his offense. So anybody who watches this show knows that that was a, dead giveaway to me that this was about survival
Yeah.
more than wanting to give up his offense. Now he's going to spin it. He spun it there as best as he possibly could. And he's going to try to make the best of it. No question about that. But I don't know if it can work long term unless the Eagles are really successful. He regains that solid footing this year. Kellen Moore moves on to be a head coach elsewhere, and things revert back to where Nick is comfortable enough to take full control over his offense again, which is possible, but that's a pretty narrow path, I would say, to imagine that scenario kind of unfolding. So right now, I think they're trying to straddle the fence. And again, if you're Kellen Moore, you're kind of off to the side with a bunch of Knicks guys. Jamal Singleton is still here as the assistant head coach and the running backs coach. Aaron Moorhead's still here as the wide receivers coach. Jason Michael's still here as the tight ends coach. Jeff Stoutland's still here as the offensive line coach. Kellen Moore's pretty much him and Doug Musmeyer against the world, so to speak. Now, you hope everybody gets along and everybody gets together and everybody's copacetic, but I just don't like the straddling of that fence.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the best way to go about things.
You think Nick Sirianni has the right personality, right? I mean, just from your experience with him, your conversations, you're off the record. I mean, do you think he's going to be a good CEO type of head coach? I actually could see it. I mean, I don't know. Admittedly, I'm telling you what I think. I think I could see it, him being a good head coach. And maybe if this works out with Kellen, even if Kellen moves on, Nick likes it. He doesn't want to go back to being in the trenches on offense. Maybe that's a better setup for him. How do you see it for him?
Well, I maintain that's the most overblown part of this, and the fact that he already was a CEO coach. He already was. So you've already
now
seen it.
Now he's a CEO coach to the maximum extent.
Well, I would take it to the other path. Now before he's a CEO coach with ultimate power over everything. Now he's a CEO coach who doesn't have ultimate power over everything. So I think it's a step backward.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
before a good perspective, right?
If he wanted to take over from Brian Johnson, he could have. And people could say he should have, and maybe he should have. But he had that option. Now he doesn't have that option. And I don't think things are going to go bad with Kellen Moore, but it's nice to have that option. He fired. I don't care if people are never going to believe it. He was the one who fired Sean Desai, didn't fire him, demoted him. And that was his biggest mistake.
Yeah, that was a tough decision there.
It was a bad decision. No ways about it. I mean, not to say that Sean should still be here. It was clear that he didn't, have the players' ear, so to speak. And that was the biggest deal with Sean Desai. Not that he was smart. I think you saw that early in the season, whether it was the Miami game, the second half against the Rams, the Tampa game early in the season, there were some positive things and positive adjustments. Look at that Rams game; they were getting torched in the first half. Made a lot of good changes. Came in the second half to completely shut down a pretty good offense. There were some positives, but from Nick's perspective, he obviously didn't have the ear of the players, and that's big if you're a coach. And certainly in a leadership position as a coordinator. And that's what it was about. But that's when you do it after the season. It doesn't do any good, especially when he started thinking about that when they were 8-1 at the bye. And then they're 10-1. And they start shifting to Matt Patricia. Made no sense. Even with all the issues. And I think Nick knows that now.
We'll see how it plays out with Nick Sirianni. John and I will continue to talk about that. We'll probably bring it up as well with our next guest who's in the green room, Caden Steele from NJ.com. patient enough to be waiting for us in the green room. Let's get to our first commercial break. I want to thank and welcome everybody in this morning. Good crowd here this morning. Just 8 days away, everybody, from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp. The anticipation has reached new heights, and we are ready to get this season underway. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show and stay tuned. Birds 365 will be right back with Caden Steele of NJ.com.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.